started in a little bit. We're gonna allow some time for folks to come in. Thanks for joining us and welcome to our People's Recovery live debrief. We're gonna sit tight for a couple minutes and then get started. So hang tight, grab yourself some tea, some coffee, anything that you want to take care of yourself so you can enjoy our live community debrief. All right, welcome folks. We're gonna get started in just 1 minute. If you're joining us in the chat, feel free, if you're in Zoom or if you're watching on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, feel free to drop a comment and let us know where you're tuning in from.
I think we need some music or something, James. So quiet.
I know, my bad. All right, we got someone in Long Beach, California. That's exciting. That's a surprise to me. Bonus points if you tell us your neighborhood, your geographic area of Long Beach. I see some folks coming on camera too. Appreciate that. We love to see folks' faces. 562. Of course, y'all. Okay, I know that. That's obvious. District 2. Okay, love it. If you're on Zoom, by the way, we do have interpretation, so in English and Spanish. So if you prefer English, please make sure to select that at the bottom of your Zoom panel.
Hola, buenas tardes. Si van a necesitar interpretación, les recordamos de buscar el icono de interpretation abajo, que es un círculo con cuadritos en medio. Lo puedes seleccionar y escoger español si es que van a necesitar traducción en español. Gracias a la persona que puso esa imagen, que nos ayuda mucho. Si van a necesitar interpretación, nada más seleccione el icono que tiene el cuadrito rojo, como está seleccionado en esta imagen. Y si necesitan ayuda, no duden en mandar un mensaje directamente.
All right, so I got a lot of folks in in the chat who are joining us from across Long Beach. So appreciate that. We got some District 5 folks. We got District 6 in the house. We got the 4th district. So we got a lot of representation, 90802 from across. I can't see Facebook, but I hope there's some folks over there as well. If you're watching on social media and you would like Spanish interpretation, feel free to come join us on Zoom. And I know we got some folks out there who could probably drop that link in the comments. So we're gonna go ahead and get started because we got a lot to dig into. I also want to remind our team, I forgot to tell our team of folks to do your best to speak slowly and calmly. That way we can allow adequate time for interpretation. and want to appreciate and show a lot of love for our interpretation team, who's joining us super last minute to help make this a reality. So good afternoon, everyone. Excited to see folks, whether you're joining us on Zoom, on social media. Thanks for taking some time, even if you just listening to us in the background. We have an exciting time to debrief and share some space together virtually while we're staying safer at home, and want to talk to you about the Long Beach Recovery Act and the People's Recovery, and some really amazing things that have happened because of community organizing, because of community power, people coming together to actually talk about an equitable recovery. So before we jump into it, my name's James, pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm with Long Beach Forward, and excited to join you with an awesome virtual table of folks that I'll be introducing in just a moment. Want to appreciate you for joining us, and also acknowledge that many of us who are coming from different parts of Long Beach are streaming into your homes, into your living rooms, from the land of the Tongva people. Many of you and many of us have talked about over time how Long Beach, the city of Long Beach, and particularly Cal State Long Beach, is home to Pavungna, the sacred site of the Gabrielino Tongva people, and want to recognize this ancestral land of the Tongva people that we occupy today. So I want to encourage you, while we're getting started, and as our virtual table of amazing people introduce themselves, to share this, to interact with us in the chat. You can drop us comments in the chat or on social media, engage with the conversation. We'd love to hear from you, any even questions that come up, and we can respond in real time too. That way we can really get into some good discussion and break down what happened at yesterday's marathon city council meeting on the Long Beach Recovery Act. So with that, I would love for our virtual table to introduce themselves and just share a little bit about you, and we can start with Audrina.
Oh, why is that? Because my name starts with an A.
Exactly.
So hi, everybody. I'm Audrina Redman. I'm co-founder of the Black Lives Matter Long Beach chapter. Super excited always to be in coalition and working with this dynamic cast of characters who deeply care about Long Beach and deeply care about seeing our city and its communities thrive and thrive together. So I appreciate y'all.
All right, how about Gabby?
Hi, folks. My name is Gabby Hernandez, pronoun she, her, ella, and I'm the executive director of the Long Beach Immigrant Rights Coalition. Super excited to be here. Always a pleasure to be here with Audrina, Suzanne, and now I'm joined by one of our members, Elizabeth. So if she can introduce herself, it would be amazing. Elizabeth, le estoy diciendo que eres un miembro de nuestra organización, si te puedes presentar.
Sí, claro. Hola, muy buenas tardes a todos. Es un placer estar acompañándolos. Soy una de las integrantes, me siento ya de integrante de la Coalición de los Derechos de los Inmigrantes. Mi nombre es Elizabeth González.
Gracias, Gabby and Elizabeth. And then last but not least, we have Suzanne.
Hi, everyone. My name is Suzanne Brown. Pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a senior attorney with the Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles in our Long Beach office. My work at LAFLA is very much focused on housing and economic development for communities of color, a lot of power building work, and it's an honor to be on this panel with these amazing community organizers in Long Beach and to have the privilege of working with you every day. So thanks for having me.
All right, I'm gonna allow that to be interpreted. So, all right, let's get into it, because I'm already getting warm. I'm gonna take my jacket off probably only 10 minutes into this conversation. So let me set the stage, and I'm gonna turn it over to y'all to really chop this up. So if you haven't been following the news in the past, literally about 2 weeks, it's really been going on in Long Beach. The mayor and city staff have been proposing and discussing a Long Beach Recovery Act, which is part of the federal plan of relief dollars that are coming down to our city and to multiple jurisdictions and cities. And the conversation locally has really been, what are we going to do to respond to this COVID-19 pandemic? And how do we look at an equitable recovery? Well, I think how do we look at a recovery? And for us, we've really wanted to ensure that for our communities, equity is at the forefront of that. And so that's what we're going to be talking about, because last night, $153 million deal was approved by the city council. There was a lot of engagement, both at the city council level, at different committees, community members. Many of you who I know, I see y'all are here watching and interacting with us, who were part of these conversations, talking to decision makers about these priorities. So a lot of questions are coming up about, what did that actually include? Is it equitable? And what do these wins look like? Where's the opportunities and gaps for us to continue working towards? So we're going to get into that. So there's a lot to cover in terms of the overview. So I would love to hear from you all in lifting up some of these big key takeaways and highlights of the Long Beach Recovery Act as it was adopted last night at City Council. So Suzanne, do you want to lift up, what are some key highlights and key takeaways for you?
Sure. Thanks, James. And stop me if I go too fast, because I tend to pick up speed as I talk. So I think I'll focus on lifting up some of the housing wins that we had last night. We really did have some significant strides forward on housing campaigns that frankly have been underway for a long time. These were not ideas that we came up with in the last 2 weeks when we jumped on working on making this recovery more equitable with these funds, but these were active campaigns, part of the Housing Justice Coalition and the housing organizing groups in the city. So the first thing that we won was $1 million to create what the city is calling housing navigation positions. What we had been advocating for in the community was a rental housing division in the city that we costed out that it would be $1.4 million. It would be $700,000 a year for 2 years. And our goal with this ask was that the city would have a dedicated division in its development services department dedicated to tenants and landlords to act as a single point of contact for the myriad of extremely complex and rapidly changing housing laws. And right now, when a tenant has a problem in the city, they tend to call their council member, a reporter, and then they end up at LAFLA. It's not a workable system. We don't have enough folks to help everybody. And as many bulletins as we may issue, the landlords will never see us as objective. So it's really time for the city to step up and to play a role in addressing our housing crisis, which is disproportionately communities of color who've been hardest hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. So what the city did with the recovery dollars was they didn't use the name rental housing division, but they used the name housing navigators. They were uncomfortable calling it a division since these are part one-time monies. They're not permanent, although we can fight to make them permanent, and I'm sure that we will. But we won $1 million to be spent over 2 years, so $500,000 a year, to create 3 full-time positions that will be called housing navigators that will act as a point of contact in the city. And so I think this is a significant win. It's something that we asked for in the people's budget last year. And I'm happy that it's been included in the recovery funds. The second thing that we won was $900,000 in additional funds for the Right to Counsel program. The city dedicated $250,000 in this year's budget for the Right to Counsel program to leverage that with the county's program. But that was a great nod, but there's a huge unmet need. We've calculated that it's somewhere between $4 and $5 million of unmet need for tenants who are going to be facing evictions as all of the moratorium expire. It's estimated that there's going to be 120,000 evictions in LA County. We expect at least 12,000 in Long Beach, and we need to make sure that our folks are represented, they get a fair shake, and that we're preventing massive displacement. So we got $900,000 in additional funds for the Right to Counsel program. It is not the $3.6 million that we asked for, but I would say it is still significant, and it will be leveraged with the county's existing structure. And then the last thing that was part of the People's Recovery Plan that we got that we're really excited about is $1 million to create the first community land trust in the city of Long Beach. This is something that the community has been advocating for a long time. We want pathways for communities of color to be able to own homes, to create generational wealth and pass that on to their children. It's something that's been denied, and it's something that's been causing massive displacement. And so the staff report, we had asked for land and technical assistance at $5.7 million. The initial staff recommendation was $500,000 to study it, which was a whole lot of nothing. So we really moved the needle forward in getting 1 million dedicated to getting the first land trust off the ground. So we still have some details we need to work out, but we still have some details to work out, but $1 million will go a long way. Those were the 3 things from the People's Recovery Plan. Just to quickly mention, 2 other housing pieces that were included are $30 million in rental assistance and $3 million in down payment rent assistance.
I know that was a lot, so I'm gonna give our interpreters a little bit of a break there, but I appreciate you lifting up all of those nitty-gritty details, and I think there's a lot, not only in responding to relief, but also sounds like a lot of proactive pieces around land trusts and envisioning for something alternatives, right, to like what we have now. So thank you for sharing that. How about you, Audrina? Do you want, what are some like highlights and key takeaways from you from this adoption?
First of all, I want to give honor and recognition to those people who've lost their lives for justice, lost their lives with injustice in extrajudicial manner. But specifically, I'm thinking of George Floyd in this case, and the energy that his death, his murder at the hands of the Minneapolis Police Department provided to our city, that really propelled these efforts that were long working for us, but really gave us that extra boost that we needed. And, you know, dare I say, to the Rona, which gave us the quiet time and the reflection time and the stark reality of the need for many of these changes, right? So I want to say that first, because I am super, super, super thrilled by the housing provisions, the housing, the issues that Suzanne just spoke about, because we know that Black folk in the city are deeply impacted by the housing crises and the affordability crises. And we know that it's Black mothers in particular who can no longer afford to live in the city. And we know every time I talk to somebody, they or someone they know is moving out of Long Beach and surrounding local cities because of affordability issues. But it is these people, these very people who bring Long Beach that flavor that make it the place that it is, right? So we don't want them to leave, we want them to try to stay. So how exciting that we have folk now dedicated in the city who will be specifically there to help people navigate those things. And I do hope that these folks are you know, culturally sensitive and accessible to all folks who represent us and who we are in our city. Also very excited about the notion of the community land trust. It was, that definitely is a model that has helped to lift Black folks in the past out of poverty and to establish home ownership, which that is the American dream, or at least that's the one they sell us. You know, that you need to own a piece of land. And I'm not being funny, because seriously, this country was built on ownership of the land, which gave you the right to vote, right? And we know that when people own land, when people own a house, they are more likely to participate in the civic process because there are different consequences for them. It also means that they are more stable. It means that they are able to lay down some roots. And so very exciting that we have the community land trust happening here. Looking forward to whatever that process will be. And the rental assistance, same thing, right? People are deeply impacted. We look at COVID and who lost their jobs. It's Black folks and brown folks working in the service industry, trying to gig economy their lives. And, you know, that man in Congress said that they ought to be able to do that at $6 an hour, because that's what he did 25 years ago. right? So we know that that's not enough. So folks do need some rental assistance. And I am super, super happy to see, as someone who is a landlord, I hate that term, that there is assistance for good people who are renting to folks and who want to do the right thing. Is also super exciting. So I'm real happy about that. I'm also equally happy that the city has recognized that, healthcare is a crisis. And I'll talk later about the things I'm not so happy about with that. But I'm glad that that the city is continuing to see it that way. And I know that's because of all of our efforts, but yeah, I'll stop there. I don't have all the specific numbers, Suzanne can pop off those numbers like that. And that's why I'm glad she's here. So thanks a lot, Suzanne.
Pays to have lawyers on your side, right?
Hey, right? It helps.
I was also dropping in. Thanks, Audrina. I really appreciate that. And also just appreciate your help to contextualize all of this too, because I think that's super important, right? I think there are so many ways that we're all still processing the events of this summer and the way all of that energy and the momentum, it has not died, it has not gone, it's still very much here. And I think we're still working through all of that as well. And so
yeah, James, if I could, the other thing I will give our the notion of universal basic income. The reality and the need for that is so great. I just learned Monday, there's a California, there's a wealth tax proposal, right? Because in this state alone, in this 1 year cycle here, that the richest Californians have increased their wealth by $503 billion. $503 billion have gone to the richest Californians. And so no wonder when you live down here where the rest of us live, so to say, and you see people sleeping on your corner, or friends, family, people around you who are underemployed, that's where that money has gone. And so the idea of providing some kind of universal basic income, because this is a thing that's happening to people. This is the system screwing people over. This is the system that has failed to hold business owners and the wealthy accountable. Our culture doesn't even have, we lack a notion of shared accountability to each other. That's the only way we have something that in this desperate time for a lot of people, where people have died and lost their jobs, that the richest folks are $500 billion richer. That's insane. I can't even imagine can you imagine what we could do in Long Beach if we had that kind of money? Anyhow.
Thank you. Yes, a lot of things. I was starting to list all the things that we could do, but I want to get Gabby in here. I would love to hear some of the key highlights and takeaways for you and the Long Beach Immigrant Rights Coalition as well.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Audrina, for bringing all that up. I think you're saying it right, that the system has failed a lot of people. And I think because of that very same thing, I want to highlight that all of this was possible because community was able to be there and advocate for that. Because when we got the news that Long Beach was getting money, they already were doing their plan. They already had something set. So if it wasn't for community advocating for this specific things, this wouldn't have happened. So I want to make sure that we highlight that all the way, because I think it's the momentum that we were talking about from the summer, right? That is now, we're seeing it now, and this is going to have tangible impacts on communities of color, and good impacts. So if you were at City Council last Tuesday, no, actually at a special meeting on Thursday of last week, you heard how terrible interpretation was. Like it was awful. It was disrespectful, for our community members to listen to that, to hear that. And so that was a prime example and evidence that we don't have a good language access policy within the city, right? And now, because of that highlight of that lack of proper interpretation and other things, right, that we've been saying of making sure that the city has everything that they have available in other languages for folks that don't speak English, right? And that is Khmer, Spanish, Tagalog, right? Those are the primary languages that are spoken in Long Beach. And so part of this plan is going to be $500,000 in additional funds for the language access policy to ensure that there is interpretation at the city council meetings and that there is proper and accurate interpretation, because it's not just enough to have interpretation, we need to have accurate and relevant and culturally competent interpretation. So yes, we got that. And that's for our folks. And I want to thank our community members for showing up and making that happen. Another big thing that we have is an additional $300,000 for the Long Beach Justice Fund. And this is amazing news too, because we've been talking about how we don't want families, immigrant families, to be separated. And this fund is going to be providing, has been providing legal representation to immigrant folks facing deportation that have strong ties to Long Beach. Either they reside here or work here. And so this is big because this money is going to go towards a fund that is ensuring that families that are facing deportation get representation, because we know that it's more likely for them to have a chance at fighting their case if they have legal representation, and universal legal representation, meaning that it doesn't matter what they've done in the past, what kind of background they have, that they'll be represented by an attorney. Because as we know, the immigration system is very complex and also unfair, and it has failed too many people. So it's just that people have representation. So super excited about that, super big win. And then the other piece is that we know that undocumented community members that come from all kinds of different backgrounds, right, don't get any type of aid, federal aid. So the stimulus checks that you might have gotten, that's not something that's going to our community members. That is something that they didn't get last time either. And, you know, any state aid is also very limited. And so one of the things that we were advocating for was for an immigrant assistance fund. And this fund would provide, you know, cash assistance to immigrant families that have been impacted by COVID. A lot of the folks that may have lost their job during the pandemic cannot get unemployment benefits. So that's not something that is accessible to undocumented community members. And so that's why we wanted to advocate for something like this. And we didn't get the $2.5 million that we were advocating for, but there has been $500,000 that have been set aside to help families directly, immigrant families directly with cash assistance. So that's amazing. Again, it's not the amount that we were asking for, but at least it's something, right? We know that folks have been forgotten, undocumented folks have been forgotten at every level. So the city is stepping up and providing this assistance to immigrant families is going to be huge and key for the recovery of Long Beach, right? Because undocumented folks are, you know, are part of our society. We're a part of the city. We're here, we're present, and we're here in this life with you all. So I'll stop there.
I love it. That was a lot of information. I was trying to keep up with making sure I could drop it in the chat for us visual folks as well. But thank you for lifting all of that up, for all of you for sharing those highlights and some key takeaways. I mean, there's a lot of components to this plan. We're highlighting some of the pieces that we really want to lift up and that community was really pushing for, but I know there's a lot of other extra components as well. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And so I want to, you know, part of this is a debrief. So I would love for us to also share more about, I think, this process, because there's, you know, this interesting piece where even just among the four of us here on this Zoom right now, right, have been through very interesting city budget processes. And so, you know, there's a lot, I think, that we learn from that. And especially as we're wrestling with this question about how do we really, and, you know, move the city towards more equitable public spending, right? And acknowledging that all of these things that we see in our community, from, you know, generational disinvestment to just, you know, these structural racial and economic inequities, all of it starts at the city budget, right? And this is just such a big opportunity. So I really want to dig into some lessons learned and insights gained through this process. And I mean, you know, even just to acknowledge that where we're, you know, where we're at in this moment, we got these wins because of community pushing and community organizing. You know, there was a lot of big lifting by our, you know, council champions. Vice Mayor Rex Richardson really helped, you know, move a lot of this forward. We also saw, you know, even in, as Gabby alluded to, in the city council committee meetings, some really strong language from new councilwoman Solisaro in the 6th district as well. So there were many pieces where council allies really helped move this piece, right? And I think that that's the result of a lot of other work that's been done that's new in this process within the city as well. Also worth mentioning, this was like one of the first times we got to see them on video, which I think was pretty great. I feel like if we have to get Zoom fatigue, you know, we all should get Zoom fatigue collectively, solidarity. So I thought that was important too. So so let's talk about that. Some other lessons learned, insights through this process of how we move and push the city more towards equitable spending and resources and allocating those and prioritizing our communities. What are some of those lessons and insights you all have learned? So I'd love to throw it over to Audrina.
There you go, starting with the alphabet again. Oh gosh, you know, I have to say, for me, this goes back to last summer even, where it was not the summer I anticipated. It was not the summer I was planning. It was incredibly busy and incredibly frustrating in some ways. And an issue that came up then continues to be frustrating now, which is, why in the heck are we afraid to say Black? Why are we afraid to reference Black people in this work? It's the city made a commitment to us. The mayor made a commitment to us. When I say us, I mean BLM, that Black folk would not be forgotten. And yet it seems that there is an inability to say Black people in these documents. And why is that critical? It's critical because if you don't say it, Black folks don't know that this is for them. That's why. There's plenty of research, social justice research, to show that people need to hear themselves. It's important for immigrant populations to hear themselves, to know that the thing is applicable to them. It's important for Latinx folks. It's important for our Cambodian siblings and our Filipino. It's important that people hear that. When Black folks look at these materials, they don't know that this applies to them. They don't know that. And so we said that to the city with the reconciliation document, and we pushed hard back on the city. They made some of those changes, but here we have the Recovery Act and we don't see it. So I've had lots of folks reach out to me to say, where are we in this? Does this apply to us? Is this gonna be inclusive of us? And that's a critical question, because it comes from folks who have a sense of neglect. We have the tale of two cities in this town. We have the Black folks who are very connected and feel like they are very much a part of things. And then we have a much larger group of Black community that doesn't trust the city, doesn't believe the city, doesn't know what the city's doing, but is definitely distrustful of the city, told us that they're distrustful of the city, but also said that what they needed was some health outreach that's centered on the Black community. I know our health department has been working on that, that they would want, the term is culturally competent. I think that the newer term is culturally tailored outreach and availability, people they feel comfortable going and talking to, and people who feel comfortable talking to them regarding these great things that we've won, especially around housing. There are going to be tons of people with that need, and they're going to need to walk into those offices and feel welcome in those spaces. And so that's just the biggest drama for me with this. Not to mention, you know, some of the time when some of our council members would act like they didn't understand what was being said, you know, and I find that completely disingenuous, because there's those very same council members who then went hooping and hollering about houseless shelters being built, houseless folks, our houseless brothers and sisters being temporarily housed in their communities, right? So, you know, don't play the ignorant game when you don't want to participate in what the people need. So there was a lot of that. It's disappointing with that. I just think we still have a lot of work to do, because the other thing is that some of these things are temporary, right? You know, 2-year funding. It's like, do you not recognize this is a long coming problem, and that 2 years is not even going to begin to address the problem? Anybody who's ever done a project knows that you're talking 3 to 5 years before you can get the thing off the ground. You can do real assessment. You have any real idea of what you actually have. And so What does it say that the city has only committed to 2 years? What does that say? It says they're still running and not ready to be responsible for that work. So, you know, we're making progress. I don't want to poo-poo the progress. I'm just saying that there's more to do. And part of that more can be helped by really developing that racial and equity justice lens, and understanding that we are not talking about diversity. We are not talking about inclusion. We are not talking about equality. We are talking about equity. That means giving everyone what they need to bring us all to this idyllic level. The COVID showed us what we needed with healthcare, right? Our communities have high blood pressure, have diabetes, have stress, you know, based on our economic and social statuses. All of that is, what do they call that? That new term I learned with the Rona, premorbidities. All those premorbidities. If they were premorbidities before COVID, that means something was leading up to them, and Long Beach is no exception from those things. And so we know that. We've acknowledged that racism is a public health crisis. Now let's put our money where that is, and let's not forget the Black folks in this town who have suffered disproportionately for forever. And if we're going to go recent history, talking about the war on drugs and the 80s and et cetera, and the way families and communities were decimated, and the way the city government and the police department participated in that. So the community is owed some kind of reparations. And these sources of monies are a way to make sure that happen. But once again, Black folks don't know that you're talking about them if you don't say it.
Thanks, Audrina. I think those are really important points to lift up, and a good reminder that these are great wins. This is great progress, and we still got a long way to go. So thank you for lifting that up. Gabby, what about other insights and lessons learned through this process?
Yes, I'll be quick because I want Elizabeth to share, but I think, you know, for us, like knowing that there was so much money that came from the CARES Act money, and that money did not necessarily go to the communities in need. And so it was a learning experience to know that, you know, when community organizes, they can make things happen. So this time around, the city's getting federal money, and this is, you know, some of it is gonna go to communities' priorities. So I think that was a huge insight for us, right? And, you know, like, again, like I said at the beginning, like this wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for community organizing and being fierce and putting themselves in situations where are not the most comfortable, right? Where it's not accessible, where it's not as friendly. So I want to give space to Elizabeth for her to share what it was like for her to advocate, to go to city council, and what the process was like for her. Elizabeth, me gustaría que tú hablaras de cómo fue tu experiencia.
Wow. Pues esto sí que fue una grande experiencia por mi vida. Pensé que ya tenía, y no, es una grande experiencia, bonita y mala a la vez, porque el participar en las juntas del concilio fue un reto para mí desde un principio, porque no había interpretación en español, y yo desde muchos años atrás tenía la intención de participar. Me hice presente en algunas juntas en el centro de la ciudad, pero no tenía voz porque no había quien me interpretara ni quien expresara lo que yo quería opinar. Pero gracias a las organizaciones pude darme cuenta que estando unidos se puede hacer muchas cosas, y me di valor para participar en las juntas del concilio, y mis opiniones sobre lo que yo quería. Lo primero que me incliné fue a pedir ayuda de interpretación. Fue bien difícil porque me sentía como que me estaban ignorando, como que habían puesto en la primera persona para interpretarme y que yo no escuchaba, no sabía si era por mi edad o era el mal servicio que estaba pasando. Me frustraba, pero me motivaba al darme cuenta que había más personas como yo queriendo opinar y apoyar lo que queríamos para nuestra comunidad. Entonces fue de la manera que yo pude motivarme al descubrir que hay muchas organizaciones unidas y ustedes han mirado la respuesta, estar aquí con todas las barreras que se nos ponen, podemos ser escuchados. Gracias.
Gracias, Elizabeth. So I will now recap what she said. I will not do it justice because she said some beautiful, amazing things. But she said it was a great experience. It was good and bad. It was challenging. And even with all the barriers that were there, she still felt empowered, you know, to voice her opinion and to demand the things that, you know, she knows that the community needs. She said that she wanted to get involved from years ago, but she never felt like she could do that because there was never interpretation. It was never an option for her. So she feels empowered to now be able to do that and to know that when we unite forces, we can make things happen. So she's really excited that about the fact that when we participate, we feel empowered, and when we unite forces, we can make things happen. And I think that's kind of the recap that I can give. She said other more things, so please just know that she said amazing, beautiful things. If you speak Spanish, you probably got all of it. And if you didn't, that was, you know, the most that I could do with everything that she said.
Gracias, Elizabeth, and thank you, Gabby. Really appreciate that. And for also just want to acknowledge, like, this is what has made, I think, all of this pandemic so difficult is our, you know, not being able to meet in person and share that connection with one another. You know, this is the best that we can do at this time. And, you know, we're looking forward to the one day where we can, you know, all be together again in community, you know, at the table together, breaking bread together. Because this is when we talk about coming together and being in community, that's really what it's all about, despite all of the challenges and all the fear and the obstacles that we face. So thank you so much for sharing your story and helping contextualize this for us too. I want to make sure we get Suzanne in here and hear any other like lessons and insights that you gleaned from this process as well.
Thanks, James. I think you're going to hear a continuing thread in takeaways on this because I'm really aligned with what everybody has said. Organize, 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 and collaborate. I mean, we are only where we're at because of the power of the people and people not giving up. And the fact that we take the time in our coalition spaces and our meetings to build trust and have hard conversations and talk about bottom lines and talk about what is meaningful, so that when this opportunity presented itself, we were ready to jump in. And there were gains. The city met with some of us, not all of us. The city wanted to talk about some issues, not other issues, but we are continually accountable to each other on text threads, signal threads, emails, meetings, everything we can to stay connected and make sure that nobody is dividing us and confusing us. And I think that that's one of the most important things. And to never give up. Nobody on this panel gives up. I can say that. And I love that about each and every one of you. But for language access, we've been fighting for over a decade. And they do want us to go away, and they do want us to take breadcrumbs, and we won't. And we keep coming. And it's really unfortunate that community members have to experience horrible interpretation at City Council and be dehumanized that way to move the needle forward. But I'm eternally grateful that our community members are resilient and they keep fighting. And every time they do that and we can publicly show the problems, we are able to move the needle forward. It's just unfortunate that that is what it takes. So I think that's it. I think everybody else did a really good job covering of it.
Can I add something here? That, you know, a decade, that's ridiculous for people who live in this city to have access. You know what else is ridiculous? Is when you go to our city's website and you can't find dang on information. You can't find very easily on the city manager. And I haven't looked since last week, so it might have changed. But last week, and then a couple of weeks before that, when I looked, go to the city manager's website. Do I see the Office of Equity there? somewhere where I can easily click on it and see all of this great information about the racist history of Long Beach and resources that they offer, racial justice tools? Is that easily accessible to me? No, it is not. So if I'm hearing all of these people talk about this, where do I find this information? I got to hunt and peck and try to have the magic keywords for the city website to pop up the information for me. And believe me, I tried keywords and it did not do that. So I mean, it is a way to disrupt democracy. It is a way to curtail people's participation and to make them feel like I'm just not want to hear to what's the word? I'm trying not to use too big of words, but to make the thing opaque. Like we know stockings, right? When you get the really, really dark stockings and you can't really see the skin tone because they're really, really dark, like to make them opaque, like really dark, like how do I find stuff here? Where is this information? And why is it that we can't have more than 20 people who pay dang on taxes in this city to give testimony? I know several people who could not, including me, because I text all y'all going, why don't I have the approval? Because I just couldn't believe that I didn't get it. It's like, and I'm glad that there were that many people who wanted to participate, but more people ought to be able to participate. More people, and at a time that's not folks trying to get home from work, 5 o'clock, who does that? That's too early. Anyway. Other things. I mean, there are blocks to people participating. That means it limits it to no shade on anybody here or elsewhere, to the people in the nonprofit industry. And then we're scrambling around. Y'all are scrambling around trying to get people to participate, or people like me. I'm a community activist. I have a full-time 50-hour, 60-hour-a-week job, and I'm doing these things and trying to do all of that. It can be better if there's a genuine desire for people's input, and if people in our city who are elected leaders and leading our city have some vision of their own that they're actually wanting to work toward, other than the next office. We just want to say that. An irritation.
I love it. I was reacting and then realized I was still muted, but hopefully you saw that. This might be wonky for the interpretation, but at the risk of sounding old, I can say, back in my day, we had lines for public comment that went all the way to the back of the council chambers, right? And it wasn't limited to just 20 people. So yeah, the fact that it's limited in that way, and it just becomes who can get to the button faster before it fills up is ridiculous.
Okay, so James, I have to say you're not allowed to call yourself old. And I'm old enough that the line for public comment used to wrap around the old city hall and through the old library, and Audrina knows, and there was overflow rooms, right? So, but I think, Audrina, this is a huge point on civic engagement. 30 minutes of public comment, it is not enough. The slots fill up too quick. We finally got them to turn on their cameras, mini wins, so we can actually see them. But I think getting more folks to be able to speak at public comment is something that we should be able to easily get and fight for.
That's right.
And cameras on mean we can see you, so we know you're listening and not going for a run and talking to your neighbor.
What? That never. What?
It did.
Also, shout out to I know Joanna's on this call for finally breaking Zoom and making it into the main room, so we could hear you saying hello during this last council meeting. Okay, so we're wrapping up. We're in our last 10 minutes, so I want to honor folks' time and that we've been able to share this space together. So, great wins. We still got a lot of work to do, right? And so the key is follow-up, right? 90% of organizing is follow-up, 95% whatever. So what are our next steps for accountability to ensure that we can get people involved and organize? Any specific calls to action you all have that want to lift up? We want to put it all on the table. So I'll throw it over to Suzanne to start us off.
Thanks, James. Yeah, so wins are only as good as the time you fight implementing and doing monitoring and accountability. So it's not necessarily as sexy as the win, but it's even more important in some ways. So I can tell you, I've already been on the phone with Vice Mayor Richardson to talk about next steps. I've reached out to the Office of Equity. I've also emailed Christopher Coons in the Development Services Department, knowing that we got these pots of money, we got a decent amount of specificity, but there's a ton of details to be worked out. We know that there's been instructions from our council champions that staff needs to work with us on fleshing out the details. So for example, on the housing navigation system, the housing navigation folks, how quickly are they going to be hired? What are going to be the qualifications, making sure they have cultural competency and they actually know about landlord-tenant law and they know the different systems in the city. For the Right to Counsel program, we want to make sure that the money gets out quick and that it gets to the county, but there's small things like, do we think it makes sense for the whole 900,000 to go at once, or do we want it to be split and it's 450 a year for the next 2 years? And then the land trust piece, another one where we need to check in with the city to confirm which of the two nonprofits is going to be holding the money. We should say which one we have a preference for, and make sure that we have Black and Brown, Asian, API tenants of color who are forming this land trust, who are going to be leading and charging the way. Similar things with language access, but so I will pause there in the interest of time and hand it off to somebody else.
Before we pass off, I do want to say, like, for folks who may be watching, I know we get a lot of messages all the time for folks who might be in need of this, like rental assistance or any other pieces, like where do folks need to go?
Are you asking me?
Oh, yeah. You're the one with the law degree.
Yeah, but don't let that fool you. So I guess I would say, if you need rental assistance, the city, call the city, frankly, ask for this housing navigator that they're going to create. The city has the money, right? So we advocated, LAFLA did, with our partners, that the city give grants to local community-based organizations who work with limited English, Black, Brown, Asian, with the different communities who are really impacted, who have trust, to do outreach and to help them get the money and get the applications in. So I would say your first point would be to call the city. You can also go to the Right to Counsel website, which is Stay Housed LA, and they work countywide and they connect you with folks. You can also go to the LAFLA website. Hopefully somebody can throw this stuff in the chat, lafla.org, and we have an 800 phone number and an online intake. We don't actually have the money, but we can help get folks to the right place. There was rental assistance money that's been spent, so I don't think this $30 million will be available tomorrow, but hopefully it will be available within a matter of weeks. Oh, and if I can make one last plug for tenants. Under the state law protections that we fought hard to win, which are imperfect, like all of these solutions, if between September and June of this year, if tenants pay 25% of their rent, and they can pay it all the way up into a lump sum on the last day of June, then they are protected from eviction. The remainder of their rent will be turned into consumer debt. It's very unfortunate that people are going to get straddled with that. We need to tackle that problem. But for the moment in time, our eye has been on keeping people in their homes and preventing displacement. I'll stop now because I'll just keep going.
No. One more thing we got in the chat. Any next steps around community land trust for folks who really want to get involved in that?
Yeah, I would say reach out to Long Beach Residents Empowered, who is our anchor community organizing group in the Housing Justice Coalition. That is a big part of the work that we are doing there. And you can go to their website. Hopefully somebody can drop it in the chat or email Beto, who is the project director for Libre.
Okay, now you can take a break. Thank you. All right. How about Gabby?
Yes. So we're on the piece of accountability, right? And getting people involved.
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah. So I think, following up with what Audrina mentioned and both also Suzanne, the piece is going to come with the accountability, like ensuring that more people's voices are heard, right? The 20 speaker limit, it's ridiculous, right? When it's so inaccessible already. Like we heard from Elizabeth how hard it was for her to even get there, right? So we need that to be expanded so that more voices are heard. Like the amount of money that was voted on yesterday, it's it's a really high amount, and folks need to be involved in that, and community voices need to be uplifted. But also Audrina mentioned that this is temporary, and this is not a fix to everything and all the problems that we know our communities are facing. So this is going to be ongoing, right? This is something that we need to continue to organize to hold the city accountable for a number of different things, right? We know that communities of color are being tremendously impacted by COVID-19. And so that's not going away. Even after, with this vaccines that is happening, we already know that the vaccines are not getting to the most, to the people that are the most impacted, right? So that's something that we're working on. But how can we make sure that that folks, are able to organize and to push for the things that are needed? So I encourage folks to get involved. They can follow LBIRC at LBIRC562 on Instagram and Facebook. For the deportation defense aspect of things that I spoke about with the Long Beach Justice Fund, if you know a loved one that is in detention, or even if they're not in detention, they're in deportation proceedings, you can call the number 562-269-1083. Again, that number is 562-269-1083. And this is a hotline that we have to be able to assist folks that are in those situations, right? And if they have strong ties to Long Beach, live in Long Beach, and they're facing deportation, we can then refer them to the Justice Fund so that they can get representation. So again, we know that, some folks may not have the ability to pay for an attorney that can end up being, thousands of dollars when it comes to this. So there's a great resource the community fought for that people can take advantage of as well. So I would just say organize and get plugged in. I think there's amazing organizations here. There's amazing organizations that are part of the work that we're doing. So get plugged in any way that you can, so you can, you can be part of this movement. The last thing that I'll say is that the $500,000 that I mentioned, we also, like Suzanne said, we don't have all the details, so the money's not available tomorrow. But I think we're going to be getting informed on what that looks like so that we can then inform community, because we know the community needs this money, right? LBRC will be providing financial assistance. We're going to open up our fund soon. So I do encourage folks that they follow our Facebook so that they can know when the application is open. Our fund is going to be able to assist undocumented community members throughout the city. And we're opening up to also cities like in Wilmington and Signal Hill.
That's dope. Thanks, Gabby. I know that was a lot really fast. And shout out Joanna, we both got the number in at the same time too. So I want to also invite Audrina, any other for you and next steps for accountability, how we can ensure people are continuing to get involved, in any calls to action you want to lift up.
Thanks, James. I'm going to piggyback on what Gabby said and what Suzanne said, which is organizing. We are planning some community conversations. Now that this is out here, it's got to be about educating the folks to let them know that it's there. Because if it doesn't get used, then it dampens our argument to say that these need to be sustained monies and with bigger budgets, et cetera, right? So I think the community organizing piece is a thing. The other thing I think is I will be urging that we be mindful of for our CLT. It is a great opportunity, but CLTs, in fact, one of the first CLTs in this country in Georgia, started by Black farmers, eventually failed in the 1980s because of the methods of systemic racism, the conscious methods of underfunding, of giving people the runaround, et cetera, et cetera. So I just want to caution us to be mindful of what those things look like. And again, the call out and the holding the city accountable for doing what it's supposed to be doing. Other than that, I want to say we will continue to be working in partnership here, because y'all do great work and we do great work together. And encourage people to follow BLMLBC on Instagram at BLMLBC, and follow us on Facebook. There's a lot happening there. And encourage folks to go take a look at, if you don't already know what it is, to take a look at the Breathe Act. That's the breatheact.org. That is what a lot of our, what were they called? The squad, which is now 7 members. That is a lot of that act sponsored by the Movement for Black Lives and clearly supported by BLM, is sort of setting a pace for what the world looks like when we defund the police and fund more of these kinds of victories that we won with the city that people really need. So that's the breatheact.org. Encourage you to look there. Thanks, James, for dropping all this nice stuff you're doing here.
Oh, that's Melissa on it.
Oh,
so.
Melissa, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, Melissa, in the background there.
Before I want to be respectful of folks' time, acknowledging it's 5 o'clock. Any other just last pieces y'all want to add in there, because y'all have just been so amazing, and I just want to make some space for that.
Yes, I think I'll just add about the budget's coming up. So this is one thing that we won, right? But then the budget season is coming up. And so I encourage you all to, again, follow all of our social media accounts, because we're going to get engaged in that as well, right? To ensure that the budget reflects the community's priorities. And so we're going to be involved again in the people's budget this year. And it's something that it's complex, confusing, but we try to break it down so it is digestible and accessible to community members that are not usually in the loop about that, because it is, it's so inaccessible. And it's inaccessible if you speak English and if you don't speak English. It's just very confusing. And so we want to make sure that we break it down for folks and the folks get involved so that your priorities get heard, so that you are also involved. So wanted to bring that up. I know that the budget, there are already parties starting to talk about the budget. So this is coming up, right? The decision ends up happening at the end of August, if not the first weeks of September. So it's, it's already March. I think I just realized today that it's already, March is almost over. And so, time is up on us, and that is something that is coming up. So, you're going to be hearing a lot more from all of us here in this Zoom, and how you can get plugged in with the people's budget.
I love it. Well, thank you all to all of us, all of you at our virtual table here, for sharing your insights and takeaways and wisdom. I really appreciate that, your stories. Thank you so much also to the folks in the background, Melissa, Edna, Joanna, Marlene, all of y'all who have been helping in the background to make sure all this stuff came to fruition. This was a really great conversation, and I appreciate everybody taking the time for us to acknowledge all the work that went into this, the wins, and also acknowledging the work ahead of us, because we're going to do that collectively, we're going to do that collaboratively, and it's going to take all of us to do that. So much love and appreciation for you all. Thank you so much for spending some time here, and I hope you all have a great rest of your week, day, month, whatever, how much longer this time is left in this pandemic.